a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
And we like to check in with Mandy Worby, who has been monitoring all the developments that's happening around the nation of Israel and more broadly across the Middle East. Hey Mandy, welcome back.
Hi, nice to be with you.
Mandy, let's start with Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East just recently. I think it was about a 4-day visit.
Yeah.
You know, a bit of a whirlwind, met with lots of leaders and things. What do we glean from him visiting the Middle East?
Yeah, it was, well, first of all, a lot of people were a bit nervous. They were going, hang on a second, he's going to the Middle East and Israel's not on the itinerary. And people going, hang on, what's going on? He visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar and United Arab Emirates. He met with numerous different Middle Eastern leaders while he was there. Highly successful, I might add. Very successful for the US and each of those particular nations. And quite honestly, back in America, both sides of the political aisle and even in other countries of the world have been awestruck by what he achieved.
I think there was trillions of dollars in military hardware, all the deals done with those Middle Eastern nations.
Really solidified a lot of very strong relationships there, absolutely. A lot of dollars exchanging hands and bank accounts. He was presented with the highest civilian honour from the United Arab Emirates, the Order of Zayed by the King. I'm going to attempt this name, okay? His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. How did I go?
I think you were close enough.
That's too much name for anybody. Donald Trump received standing ovations. He also honoured them in return. He did a lot to bridge the gap between this hostility that's been between Middle Eastern nations and the interfering West. And Donald Trump acknowledged that in a lot of his speeches and acknowledged that these guys have done amazing things in their countries and it's time to put all of that past behind and let's start moving forward. So in that regard, it was very, very good. The big concern, of course, is the nation of Qatar because they're a major, second only to Iran, sponsor of terrorism in the West and one of the major backers of Hamas. So we got to watch that one pretty closely. Yeah.
You mentioned he didn't go to Israel. Is there some sort of, further distance likelihood that he's going to do a separate visit? Maybe it just didn't work with the politics if he was visiting both sides?
He is going to be going to Israel for sure, and there was a lot of concern that maybe he was in a bid to do business deals that he was going to throw Israel under the bus because, again, Israel wasn't on the itinerary. Because also after the Houthis promised to stop targeting American vessels, the US stopped their military action against them. But the Houthis came straight out and said, we are not going to stop our attacks on Israel. And they have continued to fire intercontinental ballistic missiles at Israel, quite a few of them. Okay, and they're even threatening the Haifa port because they've already shown that they can reach as far as Ben Gurion Airport. Then, of course, there's Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He is reinforcing his death to Israel, death to America statements. Now, President Trump has said that he doesn't want to go down a military path with Iran for obvious reasons. He doesn't want to be at war, but he did say that if Iran doesn't stop, he's going to have no other option. But what has come from the meetings in the Middle East is that President Trump has encouraged about 5 Middle Eastern nations to embrace normalization with Israel and to join the Abraham Accords. Can I just tell you that's extraordinary? No other country has been able to do this. And the only reason that he hasn't received a Nobel Peace Prize is because of Trump derangement syndrome, if I'm really honest. What he has done through the Abraham Accords is phenomenal. He also then went on to reaffirm that he does have a good relationship with Israel. He hasn't thrown him under the bus. He's a very solid relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, that they are very much aligned and there's no falling out, and he backs him completely. He also affirmed the fact that he knows that Bibi Netanyahu is a very angry man at the moment. What has happened to his nation is unacceptable. The terrorist attack on October 7 was unacceptable, and the treatment that Israel has received from the rest of the world is unacceptable. He's an angry man, and he's got every right to be perfectly honest.
Mandy, what do we think about biblical alignments? A lot of people looking at Scripture. There are some people who are more obsessed than others with the thoughts of end times scenarios and looking at what's going on, and maybe even looking at potential peace treaties and saying, does this align with Scripture? How do you see things?
Yeah, well, if you've been a Christian for any length of time, even a short length of time, you'd probably be aware of the prophecy towards the end of Daniel chapter 9 that says that a world leader is going to use his influence to make a peace treaty between Israel and her enemies, a 7-year treaty, that's going to be broken halfway through. A lot of people hold to the interpretation of that verse. Now, I've got to say right up front, I am not saying that President Trump is the leader mentioned in Scripture, and I'm not saying that the Abraham Accords are a fulfillment of this prophecy. But what I'm acknowledging is that there are believers around the world who are watching with a bit of a degree of trepidation that the current movements are leading up to or might possibly be a precursor to that prophetic fulfillment. Because you've got to understand, the Muslim nations of the world are not going to accept a Jewish Messiah or leader. And the Jewish people are not going to accept a Muslim leader to bring about this treaty. But if there's an intermediary that they both find to be a friend and acceptable, then maybe he could be the one. I'm not saying it's Donald Trump, so I've got to emphasize that again. I'm not saying that. But a lot of people are looking at this as a possible precursor.
It does narrow the possibilities, doesn't it, if you were speculating. Hey, what about the hostages held by Hamas?
Yeah.
There's been all sorts of demands that they be released. Hamas is holding back. What's your thought on the latest?
Well, there are
the
58 hostages remaining in Gaza. I think they say they're hoping that it may be 21, maybe a couple more of that are alive. They're being held in terror tunnels. They're being locked in cages. They're being starved. They're being abused. The war is now at 591 days. We're almost to the 600 days mark. And out of all the nations of the world, of which there are 195, did you know there's only 18 that have actually come out and demanded that they be released? There was a signed declaration with the signatories being the US, Argentina, Austria, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, France, Germany, Hungary, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Serbia, Spain, Thailand, and the UK. Not Australia. Not Australia. Not New Zealand.
This is worthy of just pausing and reflecting for a few moments, because ordinarily, and even just a little while back, you would have certainly seen Australia on that sort of list, but they're not there.
They're not there. No, and three of those have now absolutely got Israel in their sights, and that is France, Canada, and the UK. In fact, the UK has just suspended free trade with Israel. The EU is saying that they're going to take measures against Israel. Canada and France as well have basically come out and said they're gunning for Israel. What about the hostages? What about calling for the pressure on Hamas? There's none. Listen, Israel hasn't changed their position and their stated goal since October 8, which was the release of every hostage, be they dead or alive, and the absolute destruction of Hamas. Nothing has changed there. And I will also stress that the aid is now going back into the Strip. They're now sending it back in. It is being stringently examined before it goes in to make sure nothing's being smuggled in. But who's going to stop it going straight into the hands of Hamas, who stole it before?
So what's your take on the way negotiations with Hamas have been developing?
Well, the Israeli government has said that because in the past they've had negotiations and there's been a ceasefire to get their people back. But every single time Hamas has broken the ceasefire, continued to dig in and resupply and re-strengthen themselves. And Israel says, we'll have the negotiations, no problem. We want the negotiations. We want to come to a deal. But we're going to do it while they're still under fire, because they don't trust Hamas, and for good reason. Hamas are governed by an ideology that they have given their entire heart, mind and soul to, and that is the destruction of Israel and every Jew. They will not stop. You've got to understand they are also governed by the leaders of Iran. They have the same thing. Every time they get together, their parliament says death to America, or death to Israel, death to America. Every time they get together. And it's the ideology of first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. This is the ideology. And in the eyes of the radical Muslims who have embraced this ideology, the entire West is the Sunday people because of its Judeo-Christian foundations. So whether you're a Christian in the West or not, they consider you as the Sunday people.
A few quick thoughts on the new Pope, and people are comparing him to Pope Francis and where he's going to stand on Israel. What are your gleanings?
Pope Francis was quite hostile to Israel, even going so far as bowing before an olive tree carving nativity scene that was sent to him from the Palestinians, with the infant Jesus draped in a Palestinian keffiyeh scarf made famous by the terrorist group Hamas, and before them the terrorist Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO. That had Christians all around the world, Catholic and Protestant, absolutely outraged. That was basically saying Jesus was a Palestinian. And it only was up for a day before the Vatican took it down and removed it, but the damage was already done. Now, Pope Leo, here's an American-born Pope, Robert Prevost. He appears to be wanting to open the door for a potential reset between Israel and the Catholic Church and the Jewish community, which is good. One of the first things he actually said was he called for a release of the hostages. That was one of the first things he did. And he also, in a meeting with a group of religious leaders from all various different faiths, he reaffirmed the very special relationship between Christians and Judaism, which is really good considering, church history, both Catholic and Protestant severed any Jewish connection to their faith. So this is actually really, really good. And the president, Herzog of Israel, actually welcomed him, congratulated him on his new position, and then gave him an invitation to come to the Holy Land, which is pretty significant. Okay, some high hopes there. Hey, let's end on, I don't know whether this is a lighter note, but... it is a high note. It's a good note. Eurovision. And, of course, there was an Israeli entrant, and she did pretty well. She did. Actually, last year, Idan Golan, she actually came 5th overall. And that was very soon after October 7. There was death threats, there was protests, there was the threat of boycotts, there was upheaval, lots of stuff. There was presenters in different countries who didn't want to even broadcast her performance, and yet she came 5th overall. This year, beautiful Yuval, her name was Yuval Raphael. She came 2nd overall. In the semi-final, she came 1st, which is amazing. Now, she had the same protest. One activist tried to storm the stage. They were flying Palestinian flags, which they weren't allowed to do last year. There were boycotts. There were still presenters in other countries not wanting to broadcast her, or those nations would put up a big sign before her performance to say Israel was committing genocide, that sort of thing. And the officials scored her very low. 60 points. But the people, the general population in all the nations of the world who were eligible to vote, absolutely voted for her in huge numbers. She came 2nd overall. And that was a real boost to the Jewish people in Israel, because they thought, you know what, we've been hearing all the time, most people love Israel, it's just the leaders, it's just the activists, just the media that don't like us. And that's the truth. We know that even here in Australia. And so that was actually a real boost for the Jewish people, for Israel as a nation. Well, Mandy, always great insights. And we do these updates almost every week. The breaking news update as to what's going on in the nation of Israel. Mandy Worby, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your heart with us once again today on My 2020. Pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.